Will Young is an inspiring LGBTQ representative. He came out when he was probably like 20-ish, I'm assuming, maybe even younger. I was, I think, 16, 17, and I remember him coming out, and he was really popular at the time. He was on a show called Pop Idol, and he was really inspirational because he was out and he was regular. He was just a regular dude. Whereas before then, it was only ever straight men depicting gay men on TV, and so I found that really inspirational.
That's a very long list. Yeah.
I love Ellen Page. She's so open about it, but so relentless in sort of protecting the community and speaking up when things are awry. And I think she's such an important voice to have on your side.
My inspiring LGBTQ plus friend is probably Grace Petrie. She's a singer-songwriter, and she's just phenomenal at being a role model for young people and old people as well. I think she's absolutely amazing, and if you get a chance, you should go to one of her gigs.
A really inspiring author for me is a writer named S. Bear Bergman, who I've worked with a couple of times actually, but one book of his, Blood, Marriage, Wine, and Glitter, is about different ways to family that don't have anything to do with gender, that incorporate all the different ways to gender, all the different ways to love, that I just found so inspiring and moving in the many beautiful ways that love can show up in families.
Out of a pantheon of inspiring LGBTQI heroes, I would put Virginia Woolf at the top. In Orlando, she wrote the most beautiful love letter ever to her girlfriend, Vita Sackville-West, in which the character based on Vita changes sex 2 or 3 times over the 4 centuries of her life. It is so dazzlingly beautiful. It invented a new genre in literature, and she was just such a badass lady.
I really admire Juno Dawson. She has a fantastic career as a YA author. Her books are really entertaining and inventive, and she's also a great spokesperson.
I've always been inspired by Edmund White, who is one of the great pioneers of LGBTQ writing. And I remember reading his work first as a teenager and it encouraging me to come out.
There are so many LGBTQ writers, poets, thinkers that have left a huge impact on me. If I may, I'd love to share 2 of them. One of them is Audre Lorde. Another author that has left always a big impact on me is James Baldwin. And he would refer to himself as a commuter. I love that expression about him. I do read James Baldwin again and again. The voice, this sharp mind, but also an amazing heart, it means a lot to me. And I think his work is incredibly relevant in these troubled times and polarized times that we're going through.
Kate Bornstein is my favorite LGBT. She is a trans woman who writes, all of her books are spectacular, but the one really important idea in her work that I come back to over and over is you're allowed to do anything that it takes to help you survive. Just don't be mean.
Tender by Belinda McKeown, which describes the friendship between a gay man and a straight woman and how those lines can get blurred.
It's the best fun. Rupert Everett's autobiography. You have to read it.
I think mine again would be Alice Walker, The Colour Purple, because in that she discusses a lot about, I don't know, almost like platonic relationships, but also romantic relationships between 2 of the main characters. And I read that book when I was quite young, so that was a good insight just into kind of the relationships around LGBT issues.
Mine is Ife Amadiume's Female Husbands and Male Wives. I think that's what it's called. They made me think a lot about gender fluidity in pre-colonial Nigerian societies. Yeah. But I've read it a few times. I've read bits of it like a few times, and it amazes me every time.
My favourite LGBTQ plus book I can think of recently is an obscure writer called Ronald Fairbank, who wrote a lot of short stories, modernist writer, really textured and unusual.
I really love We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. There are LGBT elements, and not that it's not the forefront of the story, but because it is, but it's handled very subtly and treated very respectfully, and it's also just a really beautiful story that's written perfectly.
I think actually a gay anthropologist's take on evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology is always really, really interesting. So Jesse Behrens, who's the author of both Perv and Why is the Penis Shaped Like That? Both books, I would argue, are better read on the tube in ebook format, but they are both absolutely fantastic.
I think my favorite book would be Orlando, always, by Virginia Woolf. I've never forgotten the first time I read Orlando as a young Turkish woman, and I read it in Turkish, and it was just amazing to me. And I think that the one word that I associate with Orlando is always freedom. It meant a lot to me in so many ways, but it also showed that you are not limited. Where you were born, who you are, even in terms of time, geography, it's a book that dares to go beyond. And I love the novel. I've read Orlando so many times at different stages of my life, each time enjoying it more. And I think it's one of my favorite books, always.
My favourite LGBTQI book would be Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I don't understand why this isn't talked about as one of the great gay novels, because it's so clearly the author crushing on the character of Kwakye all the way through. I see it as an absolute key gay text, and no one ever talks about these things. When people used to tell me about Moby Dick, I thought it was a very boring book about fishing. I actually realised it's the hottest book of gay lust ever written. Tell your friends, it's dirty.